1297 DR. The year I drew my first breath beneath the dark canopy of the Underdark, on a night painted in blood and treachery. It was the night House Do'Urden ascended through murder, obliterating House Devere to rise higher in the infernal hierarchy of Menzoberranzan. But on that very night, my life was nearly forfeit before it began. Nalfine, my brother, fell by the hand of Dinin, and his death spared me. You see, I was meant to be a sacrifice to Lolth. In our twisted world, even a newborn is not exempt from the Spider Queen's insatiable hunger. From the moment I could walk, I was shaped by the hands of my kin. My sister, Vienna, instructed me in the ways of the priesthood, though the divine favour of Lolth was never something I truly sought. My father, Zaknafein, however, was different. He was a master of the blade, a warrior whose skill and wisdom burned brighter than the empty doctrines of Lolth. He taught me more than combat. Through his unspoken defiance, he planted within me a seed of doubt, a faint but growing belief that there was more to life than the endless cycle of death and betrayal that defined Drow existence. But even that belief did not shield us from the cruelty of the Spider Queen. One act of mercy was all it took. In the heat of a raid, I turned my blade away from a defenseless moon elf child. To Lolth, this was a sin beyond forgiveness. Her favour waned, and my house turned desperate to regain it. I returned to find my father, my mentor and my only ally, sacrificed in my place. Zaknafein was gone, devoured by the goddess who had cursed our people. I fled. Before my escape, however, I stumbled upon two figures lurking in the shadows outside my house. Alton Devere, a survivor of House Devere's destruction, and Masoj Hunet, a conniving mage. I might have fallen to their scheming had it not been for Gwenhwyvar, the panther they sought to wield as a weapon. She and I shared a bond neither of them could understand, and when the battle was done, I emerged victorious. I claimed the onyx figurine that anchored her to this plane, freeing her from their control. Yet, even as I returned to House Do'Urden, the reality of my father's fate was inescapable. The walls that once held me now suffocated me. There was nothing left for me in that abyss of deceit. I made my choice. I would not live as a pawn in Lolth's web, nor as a shadow of a dead father. I left Menzoberranzan behind, forsaking my family, my people, and their twisted ways. Drizzt shifts his gaze to the shadows beyond the firelight, the flickering glow reflecting in his lavender eyes. The Underdark. It is a realm of perpetual darkness, where even the faintest sound carries the weight of danger. The air is thick, damp, and reeks of decay, yet it hums with an alien life, a rhythm unlike any surface dweller could imagine. It is home to nightmares given form, beholders, illithids, oozes that crawl and consume. And yet for all its horrors, the true terror of the Underdark lies in the hearts of the Drow. The people of Menzoberranzan live as predators, bound by chains of fear and ambition. Trust is a lie, love a weakness. Every whispered promise conceals a blade. I learned to navigate the labyrinth of stone and shadow, but I could never abide by its rules. Above, the stars twinkle with a freedom I could never find in the deep. The first time I saw them, they seemed distant and unreachable, yet they called to me all the same. To be a rogue in the wilderness, hunted by my own kind, is a life fraught with peril, but it is a life I choose, a life that is my own. I will not kill for the Spider Queen. I will not serve the will of a god who thrives on suffering. I will carve my path, no matter how dark the journey may be. Drizzt's voice softens, almost to a whisper. And so, I walk this road. With Gwenhwyvar at my side and Zaknafein's lessons in my heart, I seek a life beyond the darkness, even as the shadows of my past threaten to consume me. The fire crackles as Drizzt falls silent, his hand absently resting on the hilt of his scimitar. Drizzt, year of 3 ships sailing, 1492 DR from Starless Night. Today, we uncover one of the most famous heroes in all of Faerun's history. Drizzt Do'Urden, his life, history, and abilities that make him so successful. Drizzt was born into the 9th house of Menzoberranzan, called Diamon Nashesbayanon, more commonly known as Do'Urden, on the night when the house wiped out one of its rivals. As a male in the matriarchal society of the Drow, Drizzt was trained by his father, Zaknafein, to be a warrior in the 2-handed Drow fighting style. He excelled at this, becoming a masterful warrior before he fled the society of what he perceived to be evil Drow for the surface world. Prior to that journey, he was first disenchanted and then disgusted by the corrupt, vicious nature of Drow culture. He sought some means of escape, and in the meantime his family came to realize in their minds his abhorrent principles, and his father, the house weapons master, gave his life to save that of his son when the family's matriarch wanted Drizzt to be executed as a traitor. The path of his life took an irrevocable turn away from the evil ways of his kindred when he killed Masoj Hunet, a Drow who had been using a fabulous magical item, an onyx panther figure of power, for tawdry assassinations and other detestable work. In the panther named Ginhuivar, Drizzt sensed a kindred spirit, a fierce but brave and loyal warrior trapped in the Drow's dark world of deceit. He liberated Gwen, and later fled Menzoberranzan entirely. He and Gwen then wandered the Underdark for a decade, always moving until they found a grotto tended by the fungus people known as the Myconids. While there was life here, Drizzt was still profoundly lonely. His only companion was Gwen, and the magic that brought her to this world also sent the cat away again all too often. Not long thereafter, he discovered a city of Svirfneblin, gnomes who make their homes in the Underdark. This was what he had been seeking, a civilization that valued the same concepts of honor, loyalty, and goodness that he did. Careful to not reveal himself to the gnomes right away, because they certainly would have thought him to be an ordinary drow, Drizzt stealthily made his way into, around, and then back out of the city he learned was called Blingdenstone. Later, convinced that this was the life he was destined to have, Drizzt re-entered the city, only to be taken prisoner by the wary gnomes. Fortunately, he came into contact with a deep gnome he had met once before. Before Drizzt fled from Drow society, he had been assigned to go on a patrol. This patrol encountered a group of deep gnomes and killed them all, except for one warrior named Belwar Disengulp. Drizzt, hoping to save at least one life from being massacred, pleaded with the other elves to spare this one's life, arguing that it would be better to allow him to return to his people and tell of Drow ferocity than just leave another corpse. Drizzt's brother Dinin did agree to let the gnome live, but chopped off both of Belwar's hands first. When Drizzt again met Belwar, the gnome had 2 great metal hammers attached to his wrists in place of his hands. Belwar, remembering that he had saved his life, convinced the other gnomes to give him a chance. Drizzt proved himself thereafter when he, Belwar, and a Petch named Clacker, who had been polymorphed into a hook horror by a mad wizard, worked together to defeat the wizard and the mind flayers that were in the area. During this time, Drizzt also found himself facing his deceased father in combat. Zaknafein had been turned to an undead by an unholy drow ritual, but knowing that this creature was not truly his father, Drizzt spared no effort in destroying the abomination. Feeling that he needed to put yet more distance between himself and his drow past, he fled to the surface world, where he witnessed a sunrise for the first time in his life. He eventually met the blind ranger Montolio Mushi de Bruche, who taught him the ways of the surface world and the concepts of being a ranger, and introduced him to the existence of the goddess Mieliko, the Lady of the Forest. With Mushi's help, Drizzt began his career as a ranger, defeated a large band of orcs, and vanquished a pair of bar guests. After Munshi passed away, Drizzt again took to wandering, but this time on the surface world. After a time, he came to Icewind Dale, and the region known as 10 Towns. Under the terms of a deal he made with Cassius, the region's leader, Drizzt took up residence in the area, in exchange for his regular patrolling of the region to watch for incursions of barbarians. Before long, he met the dwarf who was to become one of his dearest friends, Bruenor Battlehammer, who was busy battling a Remmerhaz at the time. By the time Drizzt arrived to help, the beast was dead. He also came to know the dwarf's adopted human daughter Catti and the halfling Regis. When Bruenor spared the life of one of the barbarians who later attacked 10 Towns, Drizzt became acquainted with Wulfgar. Over time, the young man matured, due in no little measure to Drizzt training him to use his brain as well as his brawn in battle. This training was put to good use when a power-hungry mad mage attacked 10 Towns with a horde of humanoids. The townsfolk, barbarians, and heroes defeated the humanoids, and Drizzt overcame the Tanari Ertu. He and the other members of the band later accompanied Bruenor on his quest to retake his ancestral homeland, Mithril Hall. It was here that Drizzt met, for the first time, the man who would become his nemesis, the human assassin Artemis Entreri, who was originally after Regis, the halfling, but found his mirror image and his real foe in Drizzt. After a battle that proved inconclusive, Artemis kidnapped Regis, and the heroes followed him all the way to the distant city of Kalimport to rescue their friend. Drizzt and Artemis met once more, but again, there was no clear winner. After releasing Regis, the heroes returned north and reconquered Mithril Hall. All seemed peaceful for a time, but then drow spies found a way into Mithril Hall from below, and Artemis returned, magically disguised as Regis. Drizzt eventually found where Artemis was holding the real Regis, and the ranger and the assassin again did battle. They were both attacked by drow before any conclusion could be reached, however. They found one another later, and Artemis fell over a cliff. Wulfgar met his end at this time when, caught in the grasp of a handmaiden of Lolth, he used his magical hammer to collapse the ceiling onto them both. Drizzt soon decided that he had to return to Menzoberranzan to put an end to the drow meddling in his life, and Catti followed him. The pair eventually discovered that Artemis was still alive and working for the drow, though he suspected he was being used and would be killed as soon as he had done what the drow wanted of him. When the time came to flee back to the surface, the three of them worked together to defeat the drow. Artemis and Drizzt seemed to have come to an accord and parted without further violence. The same could not be said for his other enemies. The drow, the fiend Ertu, and others all conspired in an attempt to bring down Drizzt and Mithril Hall. An army of drow and humanoid slaves invaded, and it took the combined forces of the dwarves, the deep gnomes, and the humans to defeat them. Deciding again it was time to move on, Drizzt and his friend, Catti rode away from Mithril Hall. Drizzt wipes the foam from his lips as he recounts to Magna Mountain Tamer, a new friend, about his journeys after the spell plague. Loss. The spell plague carved that word into my soul more deeply than any blade ever could. It stole from me Catti and Regis, two pieces of my heart torn away by forces I could neither understand nor combat. In the silence that followed, only Bruenor remained, and together we clung to a shared purpose, to find Gauntlgrim, the fabled dwarven city. The path was long and bitter, stretching across 50 years of searching through shadow and war. The orcs of many arrows rose again, and I found myself wielding scimitars in their wake, not merely as a warrior, but as a voice of reason, tempering bloodshed with diplomacy. When the dust settled, we were rewarded by Leroy's leaders, but I took no joy in recognition. My heart was set on Gauntlgrim, and nothing else mattered. When we found it at last, the city was a tomb, as much as it was a treasure. Its halls echoed with ancient power, but also with the violence of another war, a clash between Thay and Netheril that threatened all around it. Bruenor fell in the battle for Gauntlgrim, a king meeting his end with honor but leaving me more alone than ever. I pressed forward, for what else could I do? I was not alone for long. Dahlia Sinfell came into my life, though hers was a companionship laced with conflict and wounds not easily healed. It was through her I encountered Artemis Entreri once more, his life unnaturally extended by Charon's claw. It seemed fate would not let us part, for he and I forged an uneasy alliance, striking against Thay and Netheril alike. But even victories carry their burdens. During the battle for Neverwinter, Gwenhwyvar, the companion of my soul, leapt through a portal to the Shadowfell, severing our bond. I could no longer summon her, and the ache of her absence weighed on me with every step. In the end, I destroyed Charon's claw, as Entreri wished, but life clung to him still. He, Dahlia, and others joined me on the road ahead, and our journey carried us through horrors both familiar and strange. It was in the Shadowfell that we found Gwenhwyvar again, but not as I had known her. She was weary, as if drained by endless torment, and it pained me to see her so. Yet we pressed on, even as betrayal and loss followed in our wake. Drizzt pauses, his voice growing quieter as he reflects. It was in Icewind Dale, beneath the vast and starless sky of my past, that my story nearly ended. Wounded by Dahlia, left for dead by those I once called companions, I climbed to the summit of Kelvin's cairn, knowing it would be my final resting place. Gwen was there, steadfast as ever, but even she could not prevent the end I saw looming. And yet, the end did not come. A light pierced the darkness, familiar yet impossible. Catti-brie, Regis, Bruenor, and even Wulfgar returned to me as though reborn. Mieliki, in her infinite grace, had granted us another chance. Their touch healed not only my body, but my spirit. For the first time in decades, I felt whole again. But as I gazed at my friends, I knew our path would not be one of peace. Darkness still loomed, and the Lich Ebonsol pursued us even then. Ours is not a tale of endings, but one of struggle, a reminder that even though we faced despair, we rose again. Drizzt's eyes narrow, his hand resting on Gwenhwyvar's figurine. For together we are stronger than the shadows that seek to consume us. Drizzt, Year of the Nether Mountain Scrolls 1486 DR from Starless Night. Drizzt is a perfectionist, and his abilities demonstrate that to the highest levels. He holds himself to the highest standards that would be impossible for most people, striving to attain the highest ideals in all he attempts. Yet he is careful not to impose his standards on others. Despite the harsh treatment he has received from the so-called good races of the surface world, Drizzt remains a valuable ally and dear friend to those close to him. Somewhat larger than a typical dark elf, Drizzt stands at 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighs 130 pounds. His handsome features are sharp and well proportioned. His white hair is long, flowing and smooth. His eyes are violet in her, even when he uses magic to change his vision. He more often than not wears a fur-collared forest green cloak and high black boots. It has been over 70 years since he first ventured into the surface world, and at present he is in the neighborhood of 140 to 160 years old. Still a young adult by elven standards. Drizzt speaks with a measured intensity, his tone as sharp as the blades he wields. His recounting shifts naturally into a discussion of combat, as if he is teaching or reflecting aloud. In every battle, there is a rhythm, a flow as natural as the streams carving through the Underdark. To master it, one must first master oneself. For me, that mastery lies in Twinkle and Icing Death, my trusted scimitars. Each blade is an extension of my will, one a guardian, the other a predator. Together, they sing in the chaos of combat, weaving a song that only death can answer. But it is not the blades alone that win the fight. It is the mind behind them. Every step, every strike, is deliberate. When I don my braces, trophies taken from Dantrag Banri himself, I feel their enchantment hum through my legs. My movements quicken. My footwork becomes as fluid as the shadows I call home. Speed can be a blessing, but also a curse. To be too fast is to lose control, to become predictable. That I learned the hard way, and so I wear them on my ankles, letting my steps guide the tempo of my strikes, ensuring that I remain the storm my enemies cannot predict. When the odds tip against me, as they often do, I rely on the tools the darkness has given me. A globe of utter blackness, sightless even for me, becomes my ally. Inside it, I shed reliance on vision, allowing instinct and training to take over. For an opponent unaccustomed to such blindness, the darkness is a death sentence. They flail, unsure, while I strike true, each cut measured and final. And yet, not all foes are so easily cornered. Dragons, frost giants, and their ilk do not fear the dark, but even they cannot escape it. When size and strength threaten to overwhelm, I guide the battle into confined spaces, or force my enemy to chase me. My innate fairy fire outlines them, a mocking glow that defies their attempts to hide. Their movements become clumsy and obvious under its light, while I remain a ghost slipping through the shadows. There are moments, rare but undeniable, when even precision and tactics are not enough. In those times, I fall into a trance, a place where time stretches and my body moves without hesitation. It is not a conscious decision, but a state born of desperation and resolve. In that trance, the scimitars move faster than thought, striking as if guided by Mieliki herself. It is not a thing I enjoy, nor one I would wish on others, for it leaves me hollow and weary when the fight is done. What then do my battles and choices teach? Perhaps it is this: the strength of a blade or the cunning of a strategy can only carry one so far. True victory lies in understanding who we are when the world seems determined to break us. In the Underdark, where cruelty and betrayal are as common as air, I learned that it is not enough to survive. To live, truly live, is to defy the darkness, to rise above it, and to carry a light that no shadow can extinguish. It is in the choices we make when no one is watching that our true character is forged. I have fought against tyranny and despair, not because I sought glory, but because I could not bear to see the innocent suffer. I have faced betrayal and loss, but I have also found love, friendship, and purpose. Through it all, I have learned that the bonds we forge with others are what give us strength. Gwenwivar, Bruno, Catibri, and so many others, they taught me that no one fights alone, not truly. It is in our shared struggles, in our moments of sacrifice, that we find what is worth protecting. If my life is a lesson, it is that we are not defined by where we come from, or the darkness that surrounds us, but by the choices we make to rise above it. And in every battle, no matter how dire, we must remember this: to fight not for the sake of victory, but for the sake of hope. Drizzt stands in quiet reflection, his gaze steady, as though daring the world to challenge his convictions once more. The scene fades into shadow, leaving only the faint sound of Gwen's distant growl, a reminder that even in the darkness, there is always a light waiting to emerge. Thank you for watching the video. We have more videos planned, so like and subscribe to make sure you watch those when they release. Thanks to our members, DJ, Alberto, John, Zeno, Fire, and Forrest, who have signed up to our memberships. If you would like to support the channel further, take a look at the links for Patreon and our membership on YouTube. See you all on the next video.